Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us in M5 Marketing Communications for an overview of the most effective media channels and marketing tactics to promote your business to Atlantic Canadians. Many of the most effective media channels are digital, and they're easy to manage yourself. I'm Nick Fry, Manager of Business Development for Tourism Nova Scotia. For those of you joining us for the first time on this webinar series, the series offers practical advice for tourism businesses on product development, marketing, and business planning. As the provincial destination marketing organization, Tourism Nova Scotia promotes Nova Scotia as a tourism destination and leads initiatives to encourage tourism growth in the province. We're going to have a little bit of housekeeping notes. So if you have any questions throughout, please put them at the Q&A at the bottom, and we'll answer them throughout the presentation. We will offer links and resources throughout the presentation. So if we're talking about something or we mention a web link, we'll throw that out in the chat. And also we will post the webinar within 24 hours online. And again, if you're just joining us for the first time, or there's other webinars that you can see that we have that you'd like to watch, you can watch them there. We also created some handy tip sheets to go with them. So if you don't have time to watch the hour webinar, we have a 2-page overview. So really great topics there for you to cover. Again, really excited to have Heather Dalton, partner with M5 Marketing Communications, with us today. Heather oversees the strategic planning, media, and technology divisions of M5. With over 20 years experience working with destination marketing organizations, attractions, and tourism businesses throughout the region. Heather works with M5's client roster to develop modern integrated programming that drives performance. So again, very happy to have Heather here today to talk to us about tactics. And Heather, welcome, and come on over and share your screen, and can't wait to hear about it. And as we have questions, just please put them in the bottom and we'll make sure we answer them for you.
Great, thanks very much, Nick.
You're
I'm going to
welcome.
try this screen share. It always makes me a little nervous, but I think that's working. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining today. We're going to walk a little bit through the media landscape and really just helping identify the right media channels that are there to reach the target audiences that you may have for your tourism business. As Nick mentioned, if you have any questions, put them in the Q&A, and I'm going to stop in between each of our agenda items, and we'll answer the questions. And I'm sure if you have one, other people probably do as well. So I find we all learn best when we ask lots of questions. And I would like to say we have a fairly large media planning and buying team within M5 that includes specialists in digital media, search engine marketing, social media marketing. So if I can't answer one of your very specific questions today, we absolutely can share that information with you quickly after the webinar today as well. And we'll kind of put our team together to answer that for you. Moving forward. All right, so in terms of the topics that we're going to cover today, first we're going to talk a little bit about getting started and some of those key considerations and questions that you need to ask before you start selecting your media. So it's often easy to kind of jump right down into the weeds and start to think about, should I use radio? Should I use Facebook? Should I be on search? We like to kind of think of it first, answering a series of questions, and then going to what people actually consume in terms of media, and looking at where people's eyeballs, where their time spent are, so that you have a good sense of where your target audience is in terms of placing your media. Then we're going to look at the actual considerations and dive a little bit deeper into your options, both online as well as offline. And then lastly is campaign performance. And we're going to talk about some of those things that really tend to drive campaign performance and what you need to kind of consider when you're setting up your media campaigns. And we'll kind of conclude with an additional Q&A. So in terms of getting started, the very first question that you need to sit down and answer yourself or with your team is your campaign objective. So why are you purchasing media? So there's an obvious business objective that comes with that, but we largely see them grouped in two key areas. Number one is, do you need to build awareness? So do you actually need to reach people with your message? Do you need lots of people to see it? Are people unaware of who you are? And you really need to actually get your message in front of them so that they know about your business, that they know about an offer or a discount or a package that you may be offering in the marketplace. And you don't actually really care if they watch a video or go to your website and book or click. You just really need them to be aware of what you need to say. And then on the second side are campaign and media tactics that drive performance. And here we're looking at really those lower funnel tactics, things like remarketing off of your website that really get people to take an action. We like to call those actions conversions, and you'll hear me talk about conversion tracking a few times here today. And that's really defining what action you want people to take, whether that's booking, whether it's going to your website and looking at a video, whether it's going to your social media channels and following your channel, and then really getting them to take that action or performance-based metric. Next, you need to consider where your audience is in the funnel. And we refer to this funnel in media buying a fair bit. It's the basis of how we look at kind of more robust and multi-channel media planning. And essentially what the funnel is when you think about a customer, they need to be aware, they need to consider, they need to evaluate you versus other options. What are they going to do this afternoon? What are they going to do this weekend? Where are they going to stay? And then when it gets to decision-making time, how are they going to book? Are they going to add anything on? Are they going to book in advance? And then on the back end of that, retention and word of mouth. So do we want people to leave us a good review? Do we want them to recommend us via social media? So we really look at what your media needs to do along that funnel. We need to have a lot of people aware so that people know you're there so that they can consider you. And then if you know they're considering you versus other people, or if you have a larger attraction or some type of anchor close to you, and you know they may be considering them, how can you become part of that evaluation set? And then how do we make it really easy to make that decision at the very, very end and get them to take that action to book or to call or to do what you need them to do in order to experience your property or attraction. Next, we really need to think about who the target audience is. And we're not going to get into a lot about how to define your target audience, other than the fact that we kind of generally think of it in 4 key areas when we're looking at media. We think of demographically, who it is we're looking to target in terms of age, income, education, then the geography of that, where they live. Are they in a particular region or city? What their lifestyle is. Do they have kids? Are they traveling with couples? Are they a family, but they're not traveling with their kids? Particularly with travel and tourism, children really kind of changed the decision-making and the thinking. And then lastly is the psychographic, their interests, their behaviors, and experiential. So we kind of think of all those things together. So if we look at someone like Mary, she could be older, she could be post-secondary education, living on a retired income. She could live in Halifax. She could be traveling just with her husband and they don't tend to take the kids or the grandkids. And they could really like things that are by water and coastal experiences and water-based activities. So trying to just think about an actual person that lines up well with your business, and then you can line up your targeting and your audience to go against those. Particularly when we get into digital tactics, there's a lot of opportunities for targeting. When you're looking at things like radio, it really, really helps to have this defined and well articulated before you get into media channel selection. Next, we look at the budget. So on the lower budget end, we do typically recommend a digital focus and primarily focusing on online media. But as you can add more budget in, or as your budget grows, or as the need to invest more in media, particularly if you're starting a new business or you have a new product or you're entering a new market, which could be the case for some people this year, given the COVID effect and the need to move closer to home, are more integrated campaigns where we start to take online but also integrate offline tactics, and then even some opportunities for some content-based marketing. And then next is looking at what your timeline is. And that kind of is really critical in terms of when do you need people to be aware, or when do you need them to take that performance. So I'm thinking that a lot of people right now are in this space, in that the season was slow to start. We don't have our typical markets right now, traveling from Ontario, Quebec, the US, and overseas. So we're making some adjustments, and therefore we need to have some media to drive traffic right now, both within Nova Scotia as well as the Maritimes with the bubble. We may need to look to next season. So if this year it was a slow start and we're going to actually be building our revenues right into the fall, and maximizing on that regional travel right into October and in November, we may be looking at, okay, do we need to build awareness now about a product that we may be offering this fall, or awareness that we're going to be open this fall, or to drive bookings for the fall if August is looking like it's packed right now. So those are the types of considerations. And then lastly, maybe next year. So we do know that for some media, for example, search engine marketing, when people are planning, they're typing in where they're looking for the future. So if we're looking for that long-term kind of investment, and people who may be planning for next summer, there are some tactics that may have a next year focus and really be a little bit more of a long-term development. So obviously those would be some slow boil tactics that tend to be lower costs that you tend to have in the market all year round. Next, we're going to move into media consumption. Not sure, Nick, has there been any questions so far? We're good?
No questions yet, but if anybody has any, please just put them in the Q&A on the bottom, and we'll make sure we get them over to Heather.
All right, sounds good. So in terms of the media consumption, that's kind of the next big bucket that we look at in terms of where people are spending their time. This has probably been a place where we've seen dramatic change over the last 10 years, and we're seeing the change slower in terms of movement from one channel to another, but we're really seeing increased fragmentation. So in the past, we would have had television. Now we have television, we have streaming services. In the past, we would have had radio. We now have radio, but we also have Spotify and online music services that are offered through online channels. So we're seeing a lot of cross pollination across those individual channels, with people listening to music via radio, but also online, looking at their TV through actual conventional TV, but also through their streaming services as well. So we're seeing a lot of kind of additional fragmentation and additional channels being added to the mix, which I will be honest is making things a bit more complex. It's making it a little bit more difficult to decide where to actually spend your money and to keep your money focused. So we'll talk a little bit from Atlantic Canada perspective where that time is being spent right now. So we use Vivi Data, which is a Canadian source that allows us to determine where Canadians are spending their time. And we are able to pull that on a geographic basis. So the data that I've pulled for you today are adults within Atlantic Canada. And I've used the broad marketplace of adults 25 to 64. And really just so you can start to see the weights and where time are spent within this marketplace and how people are spending their time. Interestingly, overall, we're just seeing more consumption. So while people have been spending 21 hours on TV for a long time, their time spent online is going up. Their time spent on radio is not going down. So we're actually seeing people just consuming more media and consuming multi-channels of media all at the same time. So they may be watching TV as well as on their mobile device. They may be listening to the radio as well as engaging on social media. They may be online listening to Spotify while they're also reading the newspaper. So we're actually seeing things kind of go across channels as well. So people are overall consuming more. So in terms of time spent, online is the number one in Atlantic Canada with about 24 hours per week. You'll see that I've included the Canadian number as well to give you some context so you can see where Atlantic Canadians differ from Canada overall. There's not a lot of difference. We spend a little bit more time on social media and a little bit more time with radio than the rest of the Canada, and otherwise we're generally on par. Of that online, you'll see about 14 hours of that is spent on mobile devices. And when people are on their mobile devices, they're mostly using apps when they're on their mobile. And that includes social media apps as a high proportion of that. So you'll see 13 hours a week is actually spent in social media. Magazines within Atlantic is 1 hour per week, and that's consistent with the Canadian average. And you'll really see print are probably the two mediums that really have taken the steepest decline over the last 10 years compared to the others. Television continues to stay very, very strong. It's 21 hours in Canada, it's 21 hours in Atlantic Canada, and about 80% of that is live TV viewing. So that's people actually watching in the moment. Traditionally, it's driven by sports, which due to COVID is hopefully coming back soon, but has been on pause for a little while. And it's driven by heavy news consumption here within Atlantic Canada as well. But we do see very, very high live TV viewing. So not everybody is watching a streaming service or DVRing, which I find people find generally interesting. Next is radio. It's about 9 hours a week, and that's a little bit higher than the Canadian average of 8. And then newspapers per week is generally quite low. It's less than an hour in Atlantic and is below the Canadian average of 1 hour. So I did actually poll, because I frequently get asked this, if that's adults as a whole, younger people, if they're my target audience, are they only online? And people really expect to see TV, radio dramatically drop off. So I have pulled those numbers for you as well. So the blue numbers are for Atlantic Canadians 18 to 34, so that younger cohort within the adult audience group. And I've included the Atlantic and the Canadian numbers for reference down below. So not surprisingly, they do spend more time online, so about 28 hours a week. That is huge. If you consider an average work week, 35 to 40 hours, 28 hours is being spent online in a week. 20 of that is spent on mobile and 17 hours a week on social media. So very, very heavy time spent. Magazine, newspaper on par. Radio is slightly less for the younger group, but still on the Canadian average, and TV is slightly less, but still very, very high at 19 hours per week. Just digging a little bit deeper into the media consumption for adults. A little over half, or more than half, 61% of digital time spent is with social media. So those online numbers that we're seeing go up, they do include things like Spotify as well, but we're really seeing social media as being the driver of a lot of that digital time spent. And more than half of it is also spent on their mobile device. So people are accessing it quite largely on their mobile phones. And then of that time spent on mobile, a big chunk of that is spent within apps, so YouTube and social media apps, and particularly in Atlantic Canada, Facebook and Instagram. We're also seeing increases in video viewing, and that's really led by mobile. So people are watching videos and they are watching it on their phone, and that's really had the highest growth rate in terms of digital time spent. So if we start to see, marginal increases, we're seeing in kind of social media channels and their growth, but video tends to be what is still in a considerable growth mode for online. If we look at this social media penetration within Canada, and there's not a lot of great data on this outside of Facebook and Instagram, who provide really good account information because of their ad platforms. But you'll generally can see them all somewhat in the same order and somewhat at the same level. So depending on the time in which the data is pulled, it'll go up and down, but Facebook definitely tends to always have the lion's share. So people say that Facebook is declining, and it is, and I'm going to show you a little bit later in terms of younger cohorts and their time on Facebook compared to Instagram, or the number of accounts on Facebook versus Instagram, but still very, very huge usage across the country. YouTube is next to that, not surprisingly, given the big increases in video viewing. Then we have Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter. Twitter's been stagnant for a really long time, really hasn't seen the growth that we've seen in the other channels. Snapchat, which tends to skew younger. So if you're in a bit of a younger audience, and Snapchat has improved their ad platforms as well. So Snapchat becoming more of an audience in the media mix, more in the media mix if you have a younger audience. LinkedIn, Reddit, TikTok starting to grow there. Still not an ad platform, but I get asked that one a fair bit lately because everybody's kids are watching TikTok videos all the time. And then lastly is WeChat, which is like a messenger type service. Because we do have access to really good Facebook and Instagram data, I did pull those for the Maritimes, and I pulled it for that 25 to 64 group, as well as the 18 to 34. So you could see how it changes for adults overall. And then you can see how that Facebook drops down in terms of the proportion of people on Facebook to Instagram. So my general takeaway is that younger people are doing both. Facebook is still a little bit more in terms of a number of accounts than Instagram, but people generally have both accounts. When you get into adults as a whole, most people have Facebook accounts, and we're seeing Instagram growing, but not that same split that we're seeing in the younger audiences. All right then. So if there's no questions there now, Nick, we'll move right on into the detail of the online.
We do have a question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So the question was, and this is about TV. I'm curious to know whether Netflix, Crave count as TV or online. I presume TV, but if that's the case, I also wonder whether the TV block could be further segmented into non-Netflix Crave TV and Netflix Crave TV. Then that same person had a follow-up that said, I think in a roundabout and clumsy way, I'm just trying to ask whether all of those categories have definitions that could be shared with us.
Yep, they do. And yes, the streaming services are included in the television. They are growing, but they're still a small proportion of television overall. And I do find, just myself being a huge Crave and Netflix user and a very low consumer of live TV, I always find them very surprising every time I pull them, the percentage of people still watching live TV. So I will provide those for you at the end. The other one as well is Spotify is included in the online and not in the radio. So those are the two that I think can kind of throw the data off as well. Spotify has been growing overall, but still kind of not in terms of the total hours spent that people have with radio. So we can follow up with the definitions of those for sure.
Thank you. That's perfect, Heather.
Yep, for sure. Also, really the online viewing and TV is highly, highly driven by sports, by reality TV, by the big TV shows that people want to watch in real time on a set time and a set night. And by news, and Atlantic Canadians and especially do love their news programming as well. First, we'll talk about paid social, and I like to talk about social as a really great place within the tourism industry to cost efficiently reach highly targeted audiences. So Facebook, while it may have a lot of faults as a platform or as an organization, they really cannot be beat in terms of ability to reach the audience and the ability to reach the audience in a very targeted way. It's a platform that you can manage yourself, that you can go in and very easily see who the audiences are. It allows you to control and plan your spend based on which audience you select, and it gives you options to kind of grow your audience out or have it more targeted. So really, from my perspective, it is a kind of baseline tactic for smaller media budgets within this marketplace. It also gives you a lot of flexibility with your messaging and having the ability to create some of your own messaging using photos and really smart posts, and then promoting those to a particular audience. So there's a lot of sophistication that can happen within social media advertising when you get into certain posts for certain audiences, doing dark posts, running different posts in different geographies. But at its base level, it's relatively easy to use, it's very cost effective, and it does allow you to be very targeted in terms of your spend. So we basically plan social media in kind of three different ways. First is traffic. So that is when you place an ad that is really designed to drive traffic. So do you want someone to click to actually go somewhere to consume some content? So you don't just want people to see it in their feed, but you want to see it so that they click through and you take them to a place where you want them to do something, read something, view something that wasn't there within the original ad. Next is video. And while YouTube is huge in terms of video consumption, Facebook has really improved their ability to have video ads within their platform as well over the last number of years, as well as Instagram. On Instagram, you're dealing with vertical videos, so it's a little bit different, but still has that really great ability to easily upload video, promote it, and have it kind of fit somewhat organically within those platforms as well. And really here, we're looking for people to do video views, to actually watch the video. We're not necessarily getting them to go anywhere. And we want them to be about 15 seconds. While you can upload longer videos, we generally find consumption is very, very low. And while we say 15 seconds, really the first 5 seconds are the most important. So I often like to say, don't leave everything you have to say to the last 5 seconds. Really, you need to make sure that you either have an interesting hook on the front end of that video that's going to get someone to watch all the way through, or that you really get that core message that you want to get across in the first couple of seconds. Also within Facebook, just a recognition and Instagram as well, that a lot of people watch with sound off. So just kind of have that in the back of your mind as well, that text over and not necessarily relying on sound for video within social is important to remember. Next, we have acquisition, and that's using paid to grow your channel. So once people are on your social media channel and you want to talk to them over time, so this works really, really well if you have an audience that will use you frequently. So maybe someone comes to your property multiple times per year, or it's something that people like to do every weekend or every other weekend, and you're offering updates and offers and trying to get people to come to you on a weekly basis. Works well for restaurants and pubs and breweries, posting menus and features and those sorts of things. So the larger you can grow your organic base and have that really strong following, the more you can update people on an ongoing basis without having to pay for those impressions. So sometimes we do run paid social campaigns that are all about just getting people to like and to grow your friend or your follower base. And that's kind of what acquisition is. Those ads really need to keep the messaging simple, somewhat intriguing, and give them a reason to want to follow you over time. So if you are a restaurant, for example, offering specials every Friday, or we update our menu on Fridays, we have a feature on Sundays. If you're a brewery, we have, our brew of the week, those sorts of things that get people to connect, give them a reason to connect with you on an ongoing basis. Oh, I went the wrong way. And lastly is engagement. And that's really where we're trying to drive channel chatter, commentary through the use of content. So these are paid social ads that ask somebody to do something. And then we're really trying to drive that interaction with the ad. So we're getting them to comment or to post or leave a message or upload their own videos to actually get people to be part of our messaging. Next is video. Digital video is very highly effective, but there's kind of two big buckets of it. One is pre-roll. And pre-roll is when we actually purchase a space that we give a defined length, typically about 15 seconds, and we run that almost similarly to what we would do with TV. So when we purchase television, for example, we would do what I call TV everywhere, and that actually will also include digital video. Some of that can be really premium inventory, which is expensive and is non-skippable. So if you want to have your ad in front of the TSN highlights of the week in Atlantic Canada, that's going to be a little bit more expensive than if you were to place a YouTube video, for example. Then we have the kind of short format, 15-second length, and the inventory is usually limited for longer formats. So again, with video, I can't stress when you're in the media space, really thinking about how you can keep them short, interesting, and concise versus some of the longer formats. Not to say that longer format video doesn't have its role, but really when we're looking to drive media performance, the shorter formats definitely perform better. Then you can actually go in and buy your digital video through YouTube. That has some really great targeting. It allows you to select your audience. It allows you to do what we call sequential targeting, so you can target the same people over time. It allows you to do remarketing. So if someone comes to your website and then you want to serve them a video after, you can actually track that person and then show them a video. So when we get into the purchasing of YouTube, it really has kind of that really simplistic form that you can just go in and select your audience and place your YouTube video ad, or you can get into more robust media planning buying as well as you get more used to the medium, or as you start to add more kind of tracking capabilities within your website as well. The format's 6-second non-skippable, and that's bought on a cost per thousand basis. And then there are longer formats that you can buy on a cost per view basis. So you only pay when someone views, and that are about 30 seconds. Next is digital buying in terms of display ads. And we generally have two ways to buy that as well. So we can buy that direct, and you can go right to a specific site. I use the Weather Network, especially within tourism. People are looking to find out what the weather's going to be like for the weekend. What's the weather going to be like this afternoon? Weather, particularly in Atlantic Canada, tends to be very heavy and a really good place for tourism. And that you can buy specifically with them, as well as local news stations as well. That tends to be a bit more premium inventory, but they do tend to be very high quality traffic as well. So while you are paying more, it tends to be really good quality. Really, in this case, we're primarily doing awareness based. So they're usually purchased based on impressions or the number of people who see it. They tend to have a high cost per thousand in terms of what the cost is. but they do have good visibility and they do have very controlled placement. So one of the issues with digital display in today's media environment is the fact that is brand security and brand safety in terms of all the content that's out there and where your ad could potentially be seen next to. So if you have concerns with that, depending on what your product is, you do get really, really good visibility for those direct buys. If you also have some issues with analytics and the ability to track and manage that, you can often get analytics and reports through those direct buys as well without having to do them yourself. Next is Google Display, which is a bit more of the self-serve model, and which I'm sure most of you would use if you were to use the digital display. Again, it's relatively easy to use. Google offers some pretty good courses. So if you have either yourself or someone at your organization to go through and take those courses, they tend to be pretty cheap and or free, and really gives you a good background to go in and start buying. It's also very cost efficient, so you can take a small budget to do a little bit of learning with, and then you can kind of grow that as you become more confident or as you have additional dollars to spend as well. That is primarily bought on a cost per click basis, so you're paying when someone clicks and not just when someone sees. It does drive a lot of site traffic, but just a bit of a heads up that it tends to produce a higher bounce rate. So you're getting a lot more volume, but people are coming in, they're going to your website. They may have a poke around the main page and then kind of heading out. So we like to kind of make sure that we're balancing those two things out in terms of how we place the media. And the placement is largely not controlled. So you can't say, I would like to have my ad on XYZ site. So while you can place it on news and weather or gaming or a bunch of different options in terms of themes, you don't generally get to choose exactly where your ads are going to appear like you would with a direct buy. The targeting is quite good through Google Display. So you do have the audience targeting. And again, that ability to track someone who came to your website and then remarket to them via Google Display is actually a really good option for that as well. So the numbers tend to be low, but those people tend to convert really, really high. So if you wanted them to book, they tend to be the type of people who go, oh yeah, I saw that ad. I was to the website, I didn't book. I should go back and do that. So it tends to be kind of the second or third touch point for them, particularly if you have something that is a bit of a higher price point. If you're a property or an operator that sells kind of room stays or overnight and people tend to check you out and then come back later and book, that becomes a really good option for you. And then there's also a high number of mobile impressions on Google Display as well. So you go back to the time spent and the number of people who are spending time on their mobile devices, that lines up well for them as well. You can buy the mobile through the Google Display. Search engine marketing, I like to call that kind of really the lowest hanging fruit. It's primarily a lower funnel tactic where people are looking to buy. So there are instances where search engine marketing can be used for awareness, but I find with most tourism operators, properties, it becomes a bit more of a lower funnel. So someone's looking for XYZ this weekend. So I would like to do this weekend. People are in active search mode, they're looking, and then you're lining up your product, your brand, your offering against someone who's in an active looking mode. We find it is the most effective in terms of generating performance. So when you look at your analytics or your report at the end of the day, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, almost always your search will be your best performing tactic, hands down. Very, very rarely across different clients will we ever see search not perform the best. We generally like to keep search always on, so 365 days a year. You can fluctuate your budget. So obviously you're going to probably want summer to be the highest unless you're a primarily winter focused business. But for the most part, it makes sense to keep your search engine marketing running on an ongoing basis. While it is really, really effective, it also tends to be a bit more of a smaller budget than the other tactics, but it's because it's a really, really narrow target. Now, tourism is a very competitive sector for search engine marketing. So really making sure that you're keeping the words tight. You're not going to want to use broad things like travel to or hotels, those sorts of things that are going to be very, very competitive. So if you can keep it as tight and as targeted as you can get away with a relatively small budget to produce some pretty strong results. One thing about search is it does need to be constantly optimized. And what that means is you need to be just going in and checking on it, making adjustments, re-looking at your budgets, determining what your pacing is going to be in terms of how you're spending. So it has some really good features that allow you to kind of not spend any more per day, so you can't overspend. There are a lot of kind of safeties built in for you as a kind of do-it-yourselfer if you look to do this yourself. But for the most part, you do need to be going in and checking it. So it is a little bit on the labor intensive side. And they're always changing it. I will say that the same for social media as well as the search engine marketing. The best practices, as well as the actual ad structures themselves, often need to be updated and changed. So that kind of makes it a little bit more labor intensive as well, and making sure that you're always staying up to date on it, redoing those Google courses, etc. Next, for the last 15 minutes, we're going to move a little bit into offline tactics. If there's no questions.
Heather, there was 2 questions. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So we have the first one, this is a while back, and it said probably it was regarding time spent.
Yep.
Does time spent equals absorption of content versus action taken?
Right. So I'm not really 100% sure the context of that. So time spent is literally.
I think it was back when you were talking about how much time they spend on different like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Right. Yeah. So it's not clearly an actual I'm 100% paying attention impression. It's the actual number of hours that people report they spend with those tactics on an ongoing basis. So it's not really clear what they're actually doing in terms of, are they doing something else? Are they multitasking? Am I in the radio, listening to the radio and driving? Am I listening to Spotify and doing work? That's kind of not well known, other than pairing in other surveys that show that people really do consume multiple media all at the same time. So it's just pure time spent and not necessarily dedicated time spent with that media. I think that answers the question, but I'm not 100% sure.
Perfect. And if Lane, if you have any follow-ups to that, just enter in another question. And this question came in, and I'm sure we're all wondering it. Is there any search engines even worth considering beyond Google?
No.
Yeah.
Not for Canada for sure. And even with the US market, the other ones are so limited. The only caveat I will say to that is Asia. So I don't know if anybody on the phone is actually directly targeting China, but Asian markets, no. But when you're in North America, absolutely, Google is the place to invest your time, money, and effort. And I wouldn't spend the time. If I had 4 hours a week to dedicate to that, I wouldn't offset any of that time into the other search engines.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Just going to also let everybody on the call know that if we go over past 11, that's fine. We're not going to stop. If you have to go somewhere else, if you have a call, that's great. We will be sending out a recording of the entire webinar after the fact. So if you have to go, that's great. We can catch the end of it, but if you can stay, that's also wonderful. And we'd also just encourage you, as you have Heather on the line, I know a lot of knowledge, and if you have any questions, just put them in the Q&A at the bottom.
Sounds good. I'll try not to take too long on the offline tactics. I think most people would be familiar with them. So what we've done for the offline tactics is kind of just talked a little bit more about the pros and cons of each. Television today still hands down is the best way to drive brand lift. So for people to know and influence and understand who you are. And we also find it pairs really, really well with search. So when we run television, we see our search traffic go up. I like to say television floats all boats. If you have television running in market, all your digital metrics go up. Often people use that as an indication to say, okay, well, we can't track television and our digital is doing really, really well. And then you pull the television out and all your digital goes down. So it is a place that really does kind of drive performance across all of your tactics. Within tourism, you can't beat the ability to have imagery and sound. It can be cost efficient within the Maritimes. So often people think television is prohibitively expensive, but the media itself, particularly within, say, Nova Scotia or within New Brunswick and PEI, can be fairly efficient, and some people are actually surprised. And it can be audience targeted by working with specific stations or working with specific programs as well. So a lot of times people think television is just blanket. That's not necessarily how we would buy. If we have that kind of really great, rich audience profile that we talked about at the beginning, we'll line that up with specific television programs that reach those people. So we look at the demographics of and the audience for the actual specific TV shows, and we line those up against it. So if you're targeting a specific target audience, it may make more sense to have one really expensive ad in one show than it would to have 20 ads running throughout the day that doesn't reach that audience. So, just kind of that robust thinking and planning around television, if you're going to invest in the medium, is to really make sure that you're thinking about who you're targeting. And a lot of stations will produce creative at minimal cost if you're going to do a TV buy. So often they will help you put together your creative. Because as you see on the cons, to kind of do full motion video production can be really expensive and is often more cost prohibitive. So if you're doing a television buy, often, particularly if it's just for a local in close market, sometimes the production can be more than what the media actually is. So, sometimes that ability to work with the stations to get some creative done can be good. It can be targeted by region or city or provincial. It cannot be targeted by region or city. It's provincial only within Atlantic Canada. And we're really talking about network television here. So the cable television networks are bought on a national basis. So that would not actually be appropriate for Atlantic Canada reach. And then last is inventory availability can be a challenge. So you can't necessarily always get television when you need it. And we often find peak periods of the year, May being one of them, September being another. It can be actually really difficult to get really good television inventory. So there's not a lot available last minute in particular. Next is radio. And, we do still like radio in terms of targeting for, especially if you have an offer, people are out driving in their cars in the summertime. Radio can be a really good consideration. It can be geo-targeted to a specific city or to a specific region. So we like that it can be really, really focused. So if you wanted to primarily target people in Moncton or Charlottetown or Cape Breton or Halifax, you have the ability to just go in and buy that market. It can also be audience targeted, so you can choose the right station format. What I had some of our buyers do, and I'll include this when I send out the deck after the fact rather than take you through, is I had all the major markets in Atlantic Canada put together what the top 5 stations were and how they lined up in terms of demos, just to kind of give you a little bit of that information. And then again, radios will often help you produce your spot at no cost. So that is quite good as well. The cons is that radio can be expensive to buy provincially, and people are often shocked when they see the cost of television, particularly related, radio, particularly as they see it related to television and some of the digital tactics. If you're buying across stations and you want to cover the whole province, particularly if you want to cover the Maritimes, it can get quite expensive. And a bit of that has to do with the fact that there is fragmented listenership in a lot of the major markets. So in order to make sure you reach enough people with enough frequency, you do usually have to buy multiple channels, and then that is what kind of helps increase that cost. Out of home, so things like billboard, transit, those sorts of things. Again, it is a highly visual, which works well for tourism type products. It is a relatively low cost on an impression base. So it is bought on a cost per 1,000. And the thing that we like about out of home, even though Atlantic Canada tends not to be a really strong drive market, like say a Toronto would be, is that it is a non-interrupted medium. So if you're driving up XYZ Street and there's 3 billboards, you're driving. So all you have is those billboards. So there's not a lot kind of distracting from your attention, like we see with some of the other mediums when I talked about people consuming multiple all at once. Digital billboards are placed in location with highest traffic counts. So that actually is a great way to efficiently have access to out of home. And as that digital billboard inventory grows in Atlantic Canada, we're seeing kind of a bit of a movement in a lot of our media plans back to out of home and using those digital billboards. There's various different types of creative that you can have for both billboard and transit. So it allows you to get a little bit of interesting, you can get a little bit of fun with it. And then there is artwork flexibility as well. So you have the ability to run different creative on the digital board. So it allows you to put up an offer for this week and quickly change it for next week. The cons is that it is largely available only in major centers and cities. So if you're targeting people outside of that, it tends to not really work well. It's very metro focused. And the messaging is confined to a really, really small space. And, you know, I always like to say 5 words and a visual. 5 words, visual, logo. So you don't really have a lot to work with in that space. So you need to have a short, succinct message that someone can take away and really get everything that you need to know, or direct them to a place where they can get more information. We largely, and I think if most of you were considering, would be working in more of a digital space. But when we get into other seasons, paper products, we see them transit shelters, billboards, buses, they can suffer poor weather, they can get covered up, they can get damaged, those sorts of things. So that kind of fits in the con list if you're in a bit of a seasonal business. Next is print. We don't largely use a lot of print anymore as part of our media buys, but they do still have their place depending on who your audience is. They are very heavily consumed by those who use them. So while a lot of people aren't necessarily consuming print, for those that do, they have a really high time with them, and they really tune into what's in them. It's really effective for reaching that adults 55 plus, so it is an older skew. So if you are a product or a business that targets seniors, this may really still be a consideration for you. People see it, even if it's an ad, to be more credible, trustworthy. It's a place where people feel they get good information versus online. A lot of time, if people aren't necessarily aware of your brand, you can kind of fit into that weariness around clicking on something that someone's not familiar with. And the newspaper ads do appear in the digital editions as well, and they have fairly high subscription rates. So just to consider that it's not 100% just the printed piece. On the cons list, as I'm sure most people know, the community papers aren't publishing right now. So similar to billboards, it is fairly limited to the major centers. And we used to find those community papers were very well consumed, and people spent a lot of time with them, but those aren't currently being published. And just as I mentioned before, circulation numbers have dramatically increased over the 5 years. So if you're not in that kind of seniors, older space or have a very defined reason for being there, it is kind of on the downcline versus the up. There are very limited targeting capabilities, and it is relatively expensive on a per 1,000 basis because of those declines. All right, so last topic, doing pretty good for time. I've got 3 minutes left. Any questions in there, Nick?
We have no questions right now.
All right, sounds good. So last is kind of looking at campaign performance, and most people think about campaign performance really as about the tracking of campaigns, and it's why people, myself included, love digital, is because of that ability to have that robust tracking. But we kind of generally see it as 3 kind of key buckets. So first and foremost is one of the key drivers of success is making sure you know what success looks like. So what are those key performance indicators or KPIs you'll see? And if you're dealing directly with any media people, they will actually ask you, what's your KPI? What is it you're looking to do, so they can help you put together the best media for them. And if you're working with an outside agency, or if you're working direct with a publisher or a radio station or a TV station, this should really be that first question that you guys talk about, is clearly defining what you're defining as performance before they start putting proposals in front of you. The next thing to think about is in those next 2 buckets, it's the relevant landing page content. So where are you sending people? So it's great to use search engine marketing, or it's great to have a really great ad on Google Display. But what is the next step? If someone wants more information, where are we sending them? And how does that connect to what we told them in the ad? Which is the next bucket there. Tailored creative development. So a one size fits all in terms of messaging is really not the best way to take the best advantage of your media. So if you want your media to truly perform well, you really need to think about, how do I create my messaging to fit that specific medium? So an ad that you're going to place on Facebook that can have a video embedded and some really great content at the beginning, and that you can help drive some comments down below, is going to be completely different than what you would have on a billboard versus what you would have in a radio versus what you would have on TV. So you may have an overarching message that you want to get out to everybody, but really using the individual mediums to tailor your creative to maximize your investment in that media. And then the last 2 buckets there are really in that measurement. So kind of having an ongoing campaign management. So thinking, not setting it and leaving it, and thinking particularly in the digital space, what's happening today? How can I update? How can I make changes? How can I use my analytics to improve things as I move forward? And that kind of connects into having the analytics and reporting. So having your Google Analytics set up and having a reporting template that you're actually inputting into, so you know if you're achieving your key performance indicators, are things going up, are things going down, is one tactic costing me more than another, and I should adjust my spend. So it may sound labor intensive, but really once you think through these things and set them up, you really only have to do kind of identifying what's in all those buckets, probably once or twice a year, but it really can maximize the benefit of the media dollars that you're spending, because at the end of the day, media is expensive, and we want to make sure that you drive the performance that you need for the cost and the investment you're spending. So looking at some of those typical key performance indicators for online campaigns, and I can send around the definitions of all of these as well after, so I'll include that at the back end of my presentation with the radio lists and with the lists of what's included in the Vivi data recordings as well. So first would be impressions. So am I looking for people just to see it? So that's an impression. Do I just want people to see it, fully take in the message? So if I have a package this weekend that's $99 at my property, I just want a lot of people to see that $99 package. And I may do some other things to drive clicks to the site, which was actual people coming to the website to actually book that $99 package. Next is conversions. And those are, again, those actions that we want people to take. So if you have the ability to set up tracking on your website so that you know someone booked that $99 package, you can actually optimize your online media to those conversions. So please optimize towards those tactics that are driving the most $99 bookings. So that gives you the ability to directly connect it to actual sales performance. But remember what I said about TV, and that you're running TV and you have that very little tracking on that online, but it can drive all your performance. Just be aware that the tactics that are driving all of the conversions, people may be seeing an ad and just being exposed to an impression. They may be clicking and going to your website. There may be multiple things that they're doing before they actually convert. So we don't want to make sure that we don't put too much weight on that kind of last click that drove the performance, and that you see things at a holistic kind of way. Then we have our website analytics. So how much time are people spending on the site? Is it producing a really high bounce rate? So people who come in and go. Is it producing unique visitors? So people who haven't been to my website, or people returning. So if I'm a business that really wants people to come, read a couple of blogs that are on my website, spend a little bit of time, come back every week, and I'm running ads that tell people that I have updated blog content that brings them back to my website, I really want time spent on site to be going up. I want bounce rate to be down. I only want to be targeting people who are really interested in that blog content. And I want a high return rate. So I want people who are coming back week over week, because I'm kind of convinced that my blog is going to convince people to come to my museum or my property this weekend. Next would be video views. So the number of people who actually view a video. There's a number of different ways that different advertisers or media allow you to view videos. Some give you a view rate, some are view throughs. So there's a number of different metrics that can be there, but just looking at kind of how many people are actually viewing the video. Social media engagement, and a lot of the social media platforms are really great at having their own analytics tools built in so that you can actually see that. And then the last is really when you get into taking those actions and those KPIs and connecting them back to how much you're spending. So not just how many clicks it drove, but what was the cost on this media channel to drive those clicks? What did it cost to get those views on that video? Or what did it cost to produce that conversion? So a particular tactic may be excellent at producing conversions, but the cost may be too high for us to kind of continue that on an ongoing basis. Offline, as would be obvious, it's a little bit more difficult to measure as robustly as you can your online. But we looked at things like total audience and percentage of people reached. So if I have a defined target audience, this radio station will allow me to reach 80% of them over the next week. Next is gross ratings points, which is a combination of reach, and it's kind of how if you're talking to radio stations or TV stations, the type of terminology they'll use, and I'll include that definition after this as well. Next is frequency, so it's the number of time people see it. Readership or circulation is the number of people that it goes to. And again, you can look at cost per thousand, cost per rating point, some of those cost-based metrics as well. And then if you have the ability to tap into a larger survey that your your region may be doing, or if you can put a question on an omnibus, sometimes you can actually do some market research pretty efficiently for like $600 or $700 a question to say if you're investing in something like a television or a radio, to really make sure that people saw your ad. In terms of reporting, kind of as a baseline to just make sure that your Google Analytics are set up. So I know there's a lot of great programs through the tourism agency where you can actually get some assistance with some of this. So I think making sure that you have Google Analytics set up is kind of a core thing. So you are able to look at your website analytics. Next is tracking end of campaign performance. So the due diligence of really putting together a little report for yourself, because we all forget. And so if you're only in the right now mode in terms of your timing and you're not going to run again until next June, July, it can be quick notes. What did you learn? What are your recommendations? Just have that documented so that when you go to do it next time, you can revisit that. If you can get a bit more sophisticated, you do have the ability to create some dashboards, and you can do that within Google Data Studio. And that really gives you kind of a real-time performance snapshot. So if you want to get fancy with the analytics, you can log in and have a look every morning and kind of see all things in one place. And then lastly, there are a lot of those easy to use tools from social media that allow you to kind of pull all that data together into one place. For the reporting, it goes back to the KPIs. Whatever you're reporting on, relate them back to what you wanted to measure, because this can be a bit of a rabbit hole and can suck up a ton of your time. So there's all kinds of metrics out there, but if it's not a metric that drives performance or not one that you were actually trying to achieve, make sure that it lines up with what your indicators were, because otherwise this can burn up a lot of time and it's not really having a lot of benefit to you at the end of the day. And lastly, just really being cognizant of the messaging. So media really allows you to get your message out there, but the messaging itself and the content that it connects to really are core determinants of whether or not your media is going to work. So I often get asked, what's the industry standard click-through rate? And I find that, and the industry as a whole does not like to speak in terms of that, because the ad messaging itself impacts the click-through rate so much that really you should be measuring off of your own click-through rate and measuring your own over time, and really looking at what your ad and what your messaging is and trying some things and adjusting it to see if you can increase your media performance. So a lot of times people will ask me, I really felt that channel didn't work, and I look at their video and it was 2 minutes long, and it was a long time getting into, and it was very sound-based, and it really had nothing to do with video as the media, but a lot to do with the messaging that was used for that particular media choice. And then lastly is the web content. If I am in search engine marketing mode and I want to do packages this weekend in Cape Breton, and up comes a property that I see and I really, really like, and I click on it and it takes me to completely unrelated content, I'm liable to bounce out and move on. So just thinking, and that media then was not effective in converting me, but if it had to take me to a page that showed that $99 package and I was able to book easily, it actually could have converted me right away. But people generally don't have a lot of patience and they move on. So just kind of really making sure that when you're thinking about media, it kind of sits in the middle of your upfront ad messaging that you're using, as well as the website content that you're directing to as well. And that's it for me.
That was really great. Very concise, relevant information. I love to have it. We have a question that came through. And this person said the presentations seem geared to bigger business with meaningful marketing budgets. Do you have suggestions for those businesses that can't afford to keep digging deeper holes beyond organic connections?
Yeah, so if I was to kind of give those baseline tactics, it would be two. It would be using social media, and depending on who your audience is, Facebook or Instagram are primarily the two in Atlantic Canada that have the predominant, and I doubt anybody's kind of really down in terms of the younger audience in terms of Snapchat. And I do find Twitter has become so limited, and quite honestly, the content has become so fragmented and a little bit on the negative side as well. It's difficult to kind of have some traction there. So if I was primarily doing organic, it would be boosting some of that content within Facebook and doing ads within Facebook and Instagram. And then also search engine marketing would be the other one. It can be, you know, you can spend a minimum amount per day in terms of that, and having it on at peak times. So people tend to look, for example, on Wednesday, Thursdays, Fridays for the upcoming weekend. And that's kind of the mindset of most people who come to your operator or property. You can even focus in on those times of the week. So I think social media first is probably your best bang for your buck, particularly if you have a good organic following and you are doing that organically anyway. You can piggyback off of the work that you're already doing. And then over and above that would be search engine marketing.
Thank you, Heather. We have another question. When your customer base is outside of the Atlantic bubble, what is the most effective platform to reach potential customers? Facebook? Like they wonder if it's Facebook.
Yeah, it kind of depends. Facebook, if you are looking at ads or video, but if you're looking at those next season planners or people who are a little bit further out, I would probably look at search engine marketing as kind of a baseline tactic there, and then potentially some social media in on top of that. Google display can be really cost effective as well. So if you're looking at a market like Toronto or Montreal, I'm not sure what external markets we're speaking to, but those kind of bigger metro centers, Facebook definitely will give you that audience targeting for relatively cheap. But Google Display Network will do that as well. So if you have some digital ads that you can include there, that is a really good option for you as well. Facebook does have the benefit of you being able to create some of those ads yourself. So it gives you a little bit more efficiency on that side as well. But I wouldn't discount the Google for Facebook 100%. I would kind of maybe try both of them if you at a small budget level and see what kind of works best for your business, and then pick the one that kind of works the best.
Oh, that's great feedback, Heather. I don't think we have any more questions. So thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll be sharing this, of course. So if there's any questions after the fact, we're going to give our information at the end. But feel free to send us an email after if you think of something later, and we'll take it from there. So thanks so much, Heather, and have a great day.
See you.
So as discussed, we have our upcoming webinars. They're going to be nothing planned now, but we'll make sure that anything shared will come through the Tourism Nova Scotia In Touch newsletters. And we would also share them through Twitter, LinkedIn, and our website as well. And encourage you to stay connected. Contact Tourism Nova Scotia through tnsbusiness@novascotia.ca. Also through our newsletter at In Touch. Follow us at Tourism NS. Follow us on LinkedIn. Visit us at our website, tourismns.ca. And also encourage you to check out our really great FAQ section on tourismns.ca/coronavirus. Any questions you have, we'd really be helpful there. There's a lot of answers there, but if not, just send us an email at tnsbusiness@novascotia.ca. My screen right now is frozen, so I completely know that I'm not in the mode I'd like to be in, but as we know, you can't control everything on digital. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and have a great day. Thank you so much.